16/12, 858 High. Ukraine versus Russia. The war that shook the world. 16/12, 859 High. Ukraine-Russia war explained. How this conflict is changing the world. Russia versus Ukraine. The war that reshaped global power. Inside the Ukraine-Russia war causes consequences. And what comes next? Ukraine-Russia conflict? The most dangerous war of our time. Why the Ukraine-Russia war matters to the entire world. 16/12, 901 High. Ukraine-Russia war. A global conflict redefining power, security. In the future, the war between Ukraine and Russia is not just a regional military confrontation. It is one of the most significant geopolitical conflicts of the 21st century, one that has reshaped global alliances, shaken international markets, and revived fears of large-scale war in Europe. What began as a regional security dispute has evolved into a prolonged and destructive conflict with consequences far beyond the battlefield. 16/12, 902 High. At the center of this war stand two leaders, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Their decisions, speeches, and strategies have become symbols of a much larger struggle between sovereignty and influence, democracy and control, and national security and global order. 16/12, 902 High. Historical roots of the conflict. To understand the current war, one must look back at history. Ukraine and Russia shared deep cultural, political, and historical ties that date back centuries. For much of the 20th century, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Ukraine emerged as an independent state, a moment that marked a turning point in Eastern European politics. 16/12, 902 High. While Ukraine moved toward independence and closer relations with Europe, Russia continued to see the country as part of its strategic sphere of influence. Over time, this difference in direction created growing tension. Ukraine's desire to strengthen ties with Western institutions, particularly the European Union and NATO, was viewed by Moscow as a direct threat to its national security. 16/12, 902 High. The 2014 turning point. The conflict intensified dramatically in 2014, following political unrest in Ukraine and the removal of a pro-Russian government. Russia annexed Crimea, a move widely condemned by the international community. Soon after, fighting broke out in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region between Ukrainian forces and Russia-backed separatists. 16/12, 902 High. Although large-scale fighting slowed in the years that followed, the conflict never truly ended. Ceasefire agreements were repeatedly violated, and tensions remained high. For many analysts, 2014 marked the beginning of a long and unresolved crisis that would eventually erupt into full-scale war. 16/12, 903 High. In February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale military invasion of Ukraine. Missiles struck major cities, armored columns crossed borders, and air raids echoed across the country. The invasion shocked the world and triggered the largest armed conflict in Europe since World War II. 16/12, 903 High. Russia described the invasion as a special military operation, claiming it was necessary to protect Russian-speaking populations and prevent NATO expansion. Ukraine and its allies, however, condemned the action as an unprovoked act of aggression and a clear violation of international law. 16/12, 903 High. As the war progressed, its human cost became painfully clear. Cities like Kyiv, Kharkov, and Mariupol experienced heavy bombardment. Residential buildings, hospitals, schools, and power stations were damaged or destroyed. Millions of Ukrainians were forced to flee their homes, creating one of the largest refugee crises in recent history. 16/12, 903 High. For civilians, daily life turned into a struggle for survival. Air raid sirens became routine, underground shelters replaced bedrooms, and families were separated by front lines and borders. The war was no longer just about territory, it was about human lives and dignity. Asterisk 16/12. 904 high. Ukraine's resistance and strategy asterisk, despite being outmatched in size and military resources. Ukraine mounted a determined resistance. Ukrainian forces used a combination of defensive tactics, local knowledge, and Western-supplied weapons to slow Russian advances. President Zelensky became a global symbol of resistance. Addressing international parliaments and calling for continued support, asterisk 16/12. 905 high. Ukraine framed the war as a fight for sovereignty, democracy, and survival. This narrative resonated strongly in Europe and North America, helping to secure widespread political, economic, and military backing. Russia's perspective and objectives from Moscow's perspective. The war is framed as a defensive measure against Western encroachment. Russian leadership argues that NATO's eastward expansion threatens its security and that Ukraine's alignment with the West crosses a strategic red line. Asterisk 16/12. 906 high. Russia has also used energy supplies, cyber operations, and information campaigns as part of its broader strategy. The conflict has become as much about political influence and global messaging as about military control on the ground. The role of the West, the United States, and European countries have played a critical role in shaping the course of the war. While avoiding direct military confrontation with Russia, Western nations have provided Ukraine with advanced weapons, intelligence support, and financial assistance. Asterisk 16/12. 906 high. The Ukraine-Russia war has sent shockwaves through the global economy. Energy prices surged as Europe reduced its reliance on Russian oil and gas. Food prices rose sharply due to disruptions in grain exports, especially affecting developing nations in Africa and Asia. 16/12. 859 high. Ukraine-Russia war explained how this conflict is changing the world.